You ever feel that little flicker of panic in a conversation? That feeling that you just don't have the right words? Well, we're about to change that. We're going to transform communication from something that causes anxiety into your own personal superpower. And we'll start with, probably the most common and awkward situation of all. So picture this. You run into someone you met last week. The conversation's actually going great until it's time to exchange contact info. And you realize you can't, for the life of you, remember their name. And that silence, it just hangs in the air, doesn't it? Oh, of course you have. We all have. It's that universal, slightly sweaty-palmed moment that just makes you wish the ground would open up and swallow you whole. But what if a few simple phrases could turn all that awkwardness into a smooth, even confident recovery? That's exactly where we're going to start, with the foundation of our communication pyramid. And look, these aren't complicated theories or anything. They're the simple, practical words and phrases that really are the base of confident, everyday communication. Okay, let's go right back to that name-forgetting nightmare. So instead of just fumbling around, you can use this phrase. The magic here is that it's totally universal. It instantly signals, hey, I'm human, you're human, this stuff happens. And it just dissolves the tension. No drama needed. Here's another lifesaver. Maybe you need to end a conversation, but you want to do it gracefully. Well, instead of just, looking at your watch and slowly backing away, saying, I'm in a bit of a hurry is the perfect exit. It's polite, it's super clear, and it respects their time as much as it respects your own. So the whole point here is building a toolkit. Think about how these phrases link together. You start a chat with a casual, how's it going? Then, if you blank on their name, you can say it slipped your mind and immediately follow up with a relatable, I'm terrible with names. See? It turns a moment of sheer panic into a really smooth, connected conversation. All right, let's move up to the next level of our pyramid. We're going to see how these little building blocks actually create the entire framework of our connections, both at the office and with our friends. Let's look at this through a story about a friend, James, on his first day at a new job. He was, terrified of saying the wrong thing. But he just centered himself on this one idea. Confidence isn't about being the loudest person in the room, it's about being prepared and being genuinely kind. And this is how that idea actually plays out in the real world. By introducing himself proactively, his new coworkers saw confidence. By asking thoughtful questions about their projects, they saw competence. And by showing genuine interest in them as people, well, they saw a teammate. That's how you build a real network, not just a list of contacts. Okay, so let's shift gears from the office to our personal lives. We kind of think friendships should just run on autopilot, right? But we forget that they don't. A friend, Sophia, once told me she realized her closest friendships were fading away, not because of some big fight, but just from simple neglect. And her insight was that friendships, they require conscious effort. And what does that work actually look like? Well, it's the simple things. It's the conscious choice to put your phone face down on the table when you're with someone. It's asking the follow-up question instead of just waiting for your turn to talk. And this one is critical. It's being vulnerable enough to talk about your own struggles, which gives other people permission to do the same. That is how casual acquaintances become friends for life. All right, now we're at the top, the apex of our pyramid, the why. Why do these phrases and actions actually work? Well, it all comes down to the psychology of connection and this thing called emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence sounds really complex, but honestly, it boils down to two key skills. First, self-awareness. In that moment of panic, can you actually identify what you're feeling? Like, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now. Then there's self-regulation. Once you've named that anxiety, can you choose your reaction instead of just letting it take over? This right here is the difference between reacting and responding. Now, what's really fascinating about this is how these rules can completely change depending on where you are in the world. In some cultures, being quiet shows respect, but in others, it might come across as you being disinterested. The thing is, there's no single right way to communicate. The real skill, that's emotional intelligence in action, is first being aware of your own style, and then being aware of the cultural context you're in. So we've covered the tools, the real-world application, and the psychology behind it all. Now let's bring it all together into a clear, simple blueprint that you can start using, today. Before we get to the steps, I really want you to let this sink in. You weren't born a good or a bad communicator. This is a skill, just like learning to cook or ride a bike. With practice, anyone, and I really mean anyone, can become more confident and more effective. So here it is, your 5-step plan. First, and this is the most important and probably the most difficult, listen more. Seriously, the best communicators focus way more on hearing than on being heard. Second, practice daily. Don't wait for some big presentation. Practice making small talk with the barista at the coffee shop. Repetition is what builds confidence. Third, expand your vocabulary. Don't just memorize word lists. Learn new words by reading and hearing them used, so you know how they actually feel. Fourth, ask open-ended questions. Questions that create a real conversation, not just get a yes or no. And finally, number 5, join a community. Find a safe place to try all this stuff out, because practicing with supportive people is for sure the fastest way to make it all feel like second nature. We have covered a lot, but it really all comes down to just taking that first step. So think about it. At work, at home, or with a friend, what's one conversation you can have today using just one thing you learned here to build a connection that's just a little bit stronger?